Hi everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Unleashing the Potential of Gen AI in Transport. Thank you very much for everyone for joining. If you have any questions, there should be a chat box in the right-hand side of your screen. Feel free to put messages in there and we will pick them up towards the end. So just to give you an overview of the agenda, we're just going to go around and introduce everyone. We're then going to do a little bit of a dive into Gen AI and where to get started with use case identification. We'll then discuss some key takeaways that we found from the Interchange event that took place earlier in the year. And then we'll go into a Q&A with your questions. So just to introduce myself, my name is Janessa. I'm the marketing manager at Ancoris. And Sean, I don't know if you want to go first to introduce yourself.
Yeah, hi, thanks, Jess. So I look after two sections within our business here at Ancoris. So I look after public sector from a transport and infrastructure perspective. So anything from railways through to roads, through to maritime, through to anything that's moving people from A to B to C. I look after those organizations, and I also look after our Google Maps customers, where we have 165-ish customers doing different things with Google Maps, and then going into Google Cloud Platform.
Perfect, thank you. And Matt?
Thanks, Janessa. Hi, everyone. I'm Matt. I'm the Chief AI and Innovation Officer at Ancoris. So I look after everything we do in terms of AI, generative AI, across all of our kind of customers and our solutions, and what we do in terms of working with our amazing colleagues at Google and into the market. It's great to be here today, and thanks everyone for taking the time to join us.
Thank you. And Jocasta?
Thanks, Janessa, and firstly, thanks to Ancoris for inviting me onto the webinar. So I'm Jocasta, and I head up our public sector transport vertical here at Google Cloud. So I work with the Department of Transport itself, along with all of the agencies and non-departmental spending bodies. And effectively, if you look at the transport kind of list, I kind of stop when it gets to local government, but I do work obviously very closely with my local government colleagues. And so, yeah, delighted to be here.
Thank you to everyone for being here. Okay, perfect. I will pass over to Sean. He's going to give a bit of an overview of Ancoris and who we are, and a bit more into Gen AI within the transport sector.
Yeah, thanks. So I guess from our perspective, we have been a Google partner for 12, 13 plus years now. So we started life as a Microsoft partner 20 plus years ago. We're based 5 or 6 minutes down the road from Ascot Racecourse, and we have offices, and we share offices up in London with Google. We work with organizations to make the most of what they're spending with Google, from a Google Cloud, Google Workspace, Google Maps perspective. So there are an awful lot of areas where Google are working with organizations that affect the way that they work day to day, and we help from a different perspective from different customer bases. So we work across retail, public sector, private sector, travel, transport, areas where people are looking to pay Google for services, and we help them make the most of those investments. And we've been doing that for quite some time. So we've had a little bit of a step change, really, I think is probably fair to say, from even November, December last year, where generative AI has really hit probably everyone's LinkedIn profile and from a business perspective. But we've been helping organizations work with Google Cloud for a number of years. But from a generative AI perspective, we spent probably the last 5 or 6 years telling people that cloud native is where you need to be, is moving workloads and different parts of the business to cloud is how you help scale, support, and grow the business that you're in. But I think it's probably not covering where organizations need to be now, actually, to stay ahead. And I think that's something that hopefully you'll take from the conversation that we're having today, is not only just probably putting a tick in the box in what you're doing now and what you're doing in 6 months to 12 months, but staying ahead from that perspective. So from an Ancoris perspective, we are very much of the opinion that being cloud native now isn't enough, because I think everybody is, if all organizations from different sectors, and again public or private sector, is looking at how they can move workloads to the cloud. But is that how you're going to innovate, and is that how you're going to prevent issues in the future? So how can you take cloud native to AI native, and how can you kind of think big on what you're going to do now, start now, and then stay ahead of what you're going to be doing? We work with lots of different organizations, as I said, whether it's public or private sector, from retail to private sector to public sector, to different organizations from areas where they're looking to take the best of the Google technology that's available to them and serve it to their customer base. We have done very, very different organizations in a perspective where we are either looking to help them from a commercial or contractual perspective from Google, through to a full analytical and application development deployment with different organizations. So if you've done anything with Wagamamas, with LVE, with TikTok, with Lush, with Just Eat, there's a fair amount of chance that you've touched on organizations and technologies that we've built for them. Matt, I'm going to bring you in here from not just so much a Gen AI perspective, but a technology perspective when it comes to taking into account, I guess, acknowledging different stakeholders within potential projects.
Yeah, sure. So, Sean was saying, we believe that there's kind of two key things that you need to be able to have in your organizations to stay ahead, especially at the moment with AI and generative AI technologies kind of really taking off, and the technology is changing so rapidly. And they are problem-solving skills and being able to adopt and apply a continuous improvement mindset. So we have a pretty simple methodology to help people do that. On the left-hand side of this picture, there's a load of sort of complexity that typically organizations need to deal with. And what we try and do is basically simplify that all down into something that is defined. So by that we mean it's got a deliverable or set of deliverables, some success criteria, so we know, everyone knows what we'll measure success by, some KPIs that we hope will be kind of mutual between ourselves and our customers, and where needed, a business case that justifies why that thing needs to happen. And then we execute on that with the customer, and try and help them stay ahead through, as I said, continuous improvement, and trying to make sure that things kind of stay on top of kind of the technology as it evolves, because especially with the AI technologies, it's evolving incredibly rapidly, but also making sure that things are aligned from internally in our customers from the business standpoint with the technology organizations that they have, and also making sure that customers kind of are keeping their skills kind of up to date, or reskilling where needed as well. So that's in a nutshell kind of how we do things. We also tend to work and focus on, as a Google technology partner, we focus on making sure that customers have working solutions. So We will tend to prototype once we've understood what the customer's kind of problem is or goal that they have. We'll prototype something really quickly. We'll move that out into either a proof of concept or a pilot stage with limited users to get feedback, and then we'll scale that pilot out based on the feedback out to kind of a production deployment, which we can then help make sure kind of stays ahead, as it were.
Yes. Ad hoc, from your perspective, your entire role is obviously talking to organizations about what can generative AI do. And I guess if your LinkedIn feed is anything like mine, it's generative AI is going to solve every problem that we have in the business world. But from a hype perspective, obviously I'm aware that our role from a Google partner is twofold, really, is saying, yes, we can solve many business problems with generative AI and Vertex AI and the LLMs that Google has, but also bringing it down to earth from the perspective of how does this affect your business from a day-to-day perspective. But any comments from whether it's talking to central government or the diversified government organizations that we speak to from a Gen AI perspective? How do you see the conversations going on a day-to-day basis?
I think there's still a lot of hype and excitement about this technology across all of our customers, both in the public and private sector. A lot of people are still trying to work out exactly how to take best advantage of the technologies, which is understandable because it's early in their adoption and they keep changing. New models keep coming out all the time. So kind of keeping on top of that's difficult. Where a lot of customers are at, though, is that they now have either some experimentation underway or they're looking to get that going, and they're really this year looking at how they can take that forward into things that actually run in production. Not every customer's like that. We've got several customers who are we've deployed production platforms that have generative AI components in them, and we'll probably talk about some of those as we go today. One way people are navigating through all this is basically trying to corral all that kind of excitement and activity in their organizations. They don't want to stifle the innovation, but they need to do it in a way that's kind of in a platform that allows them to operate kind of safely and within the bounds of what they need to operate. So that's what we're seeing at the moment, Sean.
Cool. Thank you. Thanks, Matt. Moving on to kind of the next piece of the presentation. So this is an image provided by Gen AI with me prompting, show me a Gen AI shaped hole. So from an Interchange perspective, we had many different discussions with people from the rail network, the road network, the maritime network on probably Matt and Chicasta will see this. We've been pushed down messages from C-level, I guess, reps from different organizations on Gen AI. Do we need to buy some? How does it fit in my organization? And how can we go and do this? So there is no Gen AI shaped hole, basically. So generative AI is a selection of technologies that Google has as part of the Vertex family suite that may fill some holes within an organization. So as mentioned earlier, LinkedIn feeds will be filled with generative AI posts, and we were asked questions very clearly of how do I buy Gen AI, and how much does it cost, and how do I implement it? And I think it's there will be a slide in a moment, I think, when it comes to how do you implement this technology within your organization, because I think you need to look at everything from what is the business challenge to how can the technologies that, in our perspective, Google is best in class, can solve. And there is no hole that a generative AI discussion may be able to fill, but it comes down to what's the business problem and how can the technologies that are available actually help you to do that. But Matt, from your perspective, it's probably worth us really covering off the difference between what you can do online through an application through actually enterprise grade AI discussions.
Yeah, it's an important point, and one that a lot of organisations are still trying to kind of make sure is well understood. There is a difference between what we'd call enterprise-ready responsible AI and consumer-facing AI services. So a lot of people are very familiar with, they've all sort of tried ChatGPT, the free version of it online. A number have also tried Google Bard, which is now known as Gemini, or they might have tried the free versions of things like Claude from Anthropic or Perplexity, etc., etc. The reason why this is important from an enterprise or organization perspective is because there's different terms of service between the consumer-facing services and the enterprise-facing services. So, as an example, I mentioned Vertex AI on Google Cloud. This is the Google's ML and AI ops platform. The terms of service for that are an addendum to the existing terms of service that you sign up to when you use Google Cloud as an organization. Long story short, they say where you use Google's models in Vertex AI, their AI models, Google do not store your data, and they do not use your data to improve their training data for their models. They need to process your data so the models can generate a response to that you've asked them to, but they don't store that data or use it, so it's your data.
Perfect. Thanks, Matt. Shikasta, that's probably a great idea to bring you in now. From an public use case perspective, we're probably all very well versed on having a chat with ChatGPT or Bard. I guess from a commercially enterprise perspective, how are you seeing this implemented from a public sector transport or general transport perspective?
So I think the biggest use cases that we're seeing at the moment, specifically in transport, are around procurement and supply chain. So when you are building roads or you're building high-speed rail networks, there are huge amounts of complexity, lots of different organizations all trying to work together to the same end. And the ability to be able to use a large language model to very quickly search the humongous contracts of various, multiple levels of suppliers is really, really key. Are your suppliers delivering what they said they were going to deliver? Are they doing it on time? Is it to the specification that you required? To build custom reports, so for those data analytics teams and those data scientists and engineers to build custom reports to answer those questions takes a lot of time. But with a large language model surfaced over those contracts, anybody with the ability to write a sentence can ask a question of that data and get an answer. So we've seen organizations where their analytics teams have saved 25% of their team's time by not having to answer those ad hoc queries, and they've been able to focus on delivering better reports that they normally do, rather than focusing on those ad hoc ones, because they can give that capability to the users. And so that, for me, that's really what a modern data strategy is all about. It's about meeting people where their AI skills are, and giving them the ability, whether you're a data scientist and you really, really want to go deep into the technology, or whether you're an end user who just wants an answer to a question that they've been asked in order to move on to the next step of their job.
Yeah, we're seeing that a lot, Shasta, where people are taking these technologies and putting to use in areas like contract management. Another thing that we're seeing, and we've done this with another customer in a different sector, but for the team that looks after all of their contracts, is summarizing those contracts. So where different contracts with different suppliers to that customer have slightly different wordings and different clauses, the customer wants to understand their risk profile across all those disparate contracts that they've got. So we've helped them use some of Google's generative AI models to surface that information for them in a way that's really easy for them to understand and take action. So there's a big time saver for them, and as you called out, some of the kind of percentages of time that you can save with this stuff is significant. But there's also a knowledge increment as well that people get, because they get better visibility of things like risk, which perhaps is a little bit harder for them to quantify, but it's really important for them as an organization to be aware of. So there's definitely a lot of competitive advantage that customers can get from adopting these technologies to solve the problems they have.
Matt, Castor, from a tangible perspective, from talking to transport organisations, I've mentioned already previously, everyone's been given messages from their C-level teams of, do we need this? Do we need this technology? Is this the next big thing? Again, Matt Chicasta, how would you start about identifying an appropriate use case? Chicasta, we've mentioned, I guess that in the conversations, that the 10, 15 conversations we've had in the last 2 weeks with different public sector organizations, asset management and what is your data strategy? So we can talk about generative AI until the cows come home, as it were, but taking it back a step, when you're identifying use cases, and we'll go on to, I guess, our steps on how you kickstart a project in those areas and start to see something that's actually making a difference. But again, Matt Chicasta, whether it's asset management, whether it's how do you kickstart these opportunities, whether it's how do we understand what our data strategy is in this area, that's a very broad question. I understand that, but and opening questions in those areas.
So I think, Sean, as you and I discussed actually quite recently on a call last week, that the foundation for any AI, whether it's generative or not, is having a really solid, healthy, robust data foundation. Because whatever questions you're asking, you're only going to get back, data or answers that are impactful if your data is clean, if it's understandable, if it's correct, if it's and are you actually, do you have a single source of truth, or so all of that. So having that robust data foundation is absolutely critical. However, there is a but to that, because if we wait, and if organizations wait until they have the perfect data platform, then nobody's going to do anything, and we're going to end up actually probably where we are right now, which is where we have organizations who have huge amounts of data locked in legacy platforms where the rules haven't changed since the 1800s. It's so you have to start somewhere. So for me, finding a place where you are relatively confident that the data is applicable and is good, and then working out actually what is going to have the most impact. Where can you focus your activities to say, okay, for the least amount of effort, we're going to get the maximum amount of impact. And whilst we as Google and you as Ancoris can advise on the technology and how that works, it's the customers who know that. They know their business better than us. So that's why it needs to be this two-way conversation. And just the final thing I'd add before I let Matt talk is that technology, we're all going, yeah, technology is great and it's fantastic, it's brilliant, and it's going to solve all of these problems. It will not solve any of those problems unless it is aligned with your people and it is aligned with your processes. Buying technology for technology's sake does not work. You have to ensure that you are looking at the entire workflow and making sure that that technology is weaved into that workflow. So you have to really dive deep into how does the person whose job it is to do this work, because you have to feed it into the way that they are doing their job. It might require some change, but ultimately it's got to be flow into that. And the people side of it, they've got to be bought in. You can't, I mean, anyone who's been in, I've been in IT for nearly 30 years. There is no IT system in the world that has worked if it's just handed to users and gone, there you go. So you have to bring the people. And as you and Ancoris know, Google's first tenet is focus on the user and everything else will follow. So making sure that you really have your users bought in and involved in the process is going to make it highly successful.
It's a hugely important point. There's no point in embarking on a project unless you're going to get something on the other side of the equals sign, and that's normally an ROI based discussion. Matt, from your perspective, ideation is a huge part of what we do. I guess comments on that will be interesting.
Chigasta's absolutely right. You've got to get your data ducks in a row, but you can't afford to wait for some massive kind of ball the ocean transformation program, which I see that's the mistake that most organizations, the most common mistake I see. I've seen that for a number of years, before AI as well. People sort of set off on these massive data transformations that never end, and they never actually get to the value of what they're trying to, the reason why they're trying to do it. So yes, it's important to make sure that you've got all your data and it's well engineered and it's you're able to take advantage of it. But the key thing is to get, exactly as Chicasta said, is to get something or some set of data that is good enough to start. Because if you don't start, you're going to lose any competitive advantage that you were hoping to gain from adopting this technology. The second thing that you said, Chicasta, which I thought was also spot on, is that you need to bring people on the journey with you. So where you have existing skill sets in the organization, you need to reassure people that those skills are relevant, and they can also have the opportunity to upskill as well. Most of the best adoptions of this technology that I've seen are collaborations between the technical and non-technical side of our customers where we work with them. Having the business domain experts, the subject matter experts closely involved in adopting these technologies is really important. This word ideation, which is a slightly odd word, but basically it's about thinking about the ideas. So the goals that you have, or the problems that you want to solve, or the constraints that you need to operate under, or some combination of those things. And you do that before you think about the specific technologies. So what we always say is we want to start with the problem, not with the solution, because by understanding the problem, we can understand what would be an amazing thing to do to solve that problem, and whether or not we can solve it at a much greater kind of scale or magnitude than perhaps we were initially thinking about. And once we've done that, we can then think about what's the right technology, what's the right tool for the job. So ideation is really, really important. And often what we see is customers, either we help them with that through some fairly short workshop type activities that we do with them. Sometimes customers already have some thinking around what they're trying to achieve and why, and really they just want some help refining that into something that could be the basis for a solution. So different customers are at different stages of their ideation as well as the adoption of this technology. But it's really important that you start there rather than, as you said, Sean, earlier, thinking, right, how do I go and buy some Gen AI? I've got an action from some senior leadership to make sure we've deployed some Gen AI somewhere. I think if you start with the solution, you don't necessarily know what the problem is you're trying to solve. So, from my perspective, your organization is right to think, how could I take advantage of AI and generative AI, and how could I deploy it? But you need to start somewhere else, slightly. You need to say, right, okay, what do we want to do? How do we want to achieve it? And then once we've understood that, we can think about whether or not AI and generative AI is the right technology to achieve those things.
Yeah, it's got to be problem led, right? There's only so many conversations you can have as far as in enforcing your ideal technology on people, but it has to be problem led and then ROI solved. So yeah, that's a good point. Janessa, I think you were looking to move to a separate slide.
Thank you, everyone. I thought we'd just touch on quickly. So Interchange took place February 27th, 28th. So not too far away. We obviously, a few people on the call might have been there, but just to give you an overview, it was around the future of transport. It was a very exciting event. We've kind of pulled out our key findings from the event. So I don't know if we want to have a quick discussion around some of those findings that we found from it. I know we've touched slightly on asset management, but yeah, these are our findings.
Yeah, asset management. I'll dive in on that one if it's okay with you both, Chikaster and Sean. We've done this for a few customers where they needed the ability for the public to report on the state of things that they look after. So the way we did this was basically understand what problem they were trying to solve, which is in this case, people are very good at kind of not being happy about the state of kind of their surrounding environment, be it they have a problem with litter or graffiti or animal fouling or rubbish, but they didn't have a great way. There wasn't a great way of them reporting that problem with enough information that our customer could take advantage of that information to do something about the problem. So we listened to what the problem was, and we went away and we built a really quick prototype. And by quick, I mean in a matter of less than a handful of days, which was it's a progressive web application. That means it runs on any kind of screen size. Users can use it to take a photo of the thing they want to report. We use Google's image classification AI to identify what's in the photo. And we give the users what we call a conversational interface or an AI-backed chatbot interface, which then says to the user, right, is this thing that you're reporting graffiti or rubbish or something else? And the user is then guided through a really quick workflow to report that information. We use Google Maps APIs and the photo metadata to geolocate where that item is, and then we use generative AI again to extract that information from what the users reported and put it into structured data that the customer can then prioritize in their ticketing systems and deal with. And this is something that we did as a prototype, as I said, very quickly. The customer really liked that prototype, so we built it into a pilot for limited numbers of users. We got feedback on that pilot from those users, and then we scaled that out into production. This is a production service that if you're in parts of London, in the UK, you can use this service to report on these kind of things to the council that looks after that part of London. So this is a real world application of this technology to manage a series of assets. And as hopefully you can understand, it's entirely transferable into managing infrastructure assets. If people need a really quick, easy way to report on the state of those infrastructure assets, we can show exactly how you can do that, and we can actually do that for you as a customer.
And to build on that, and moving into that kind of infrastructure asset piece, so one of the big areas that I'm seeing at the moment from my clients is all about, where are my assets? Because we know that, sadly, a lot of the kind of geospatial data that exists around where assets are is not 100% reliable. So actually, where are my assets? What is the state of my assets? And that really builds into that predictive maintenance kind of capability. And using the Gen AI, you can then, as I said before, build it into the workflow so that you're saying, okay, so I've had an alert, this particular widget needs some maintenance, and the users can just sort of type in, where do I buy one of these? Do we have any of these in stock? Show me the page in the manual that tells me how to replace this part, and all of that. And you build all of that into the workflow to basically make everything quicker, faster, and more reliable. And at the end of the day, from a transport perspective, a reliable transport service is absolutely key.
Yeah, we've got another customer that we've built a service for them. They have instructions for their engineers in terms of procedures that they have to follow, and they have to manually create those procedures from source data that their vendors provide in lots of disparate documentation. So manually, they're basically finding the right sections in the vendors' engineering information, and then copying and pasting that information into procedures for their engineers. So we've used some of Google's AI models to essentially identify what the relevant areas in the vendor information are, and then to collate that and summarize it for the engineers that need to actually do the job. So we're seeing exactly that kind of application of this technology, Jocasta. And it really is, it's something that is saving entire kind of days worth of effort from this customer's perspective. And what that means is that the people who actually are involved in this process, we've automated, back to the boring AI point, we've automated away a lot of the kind of the mundane side of what they do, so they can then focus on the higher value things that they do. So it's a great example where you can take this kind of technology and make it directly relevant to this kind of sector.
Okay, thank you. I think we'll jump into some questions because we've just got a few minutes left. So the first question, this is open to everyone. Have you seen any real life examples, good real life examples of Gen AI in the transport sector at the moment?
Yes, is I guess the short answer. So anything from a mobile asset management perspective of how is my train performing? Do I have a faulty part on that train, and utilizing generative AI to manage the process of reporting that through to I guess driving the repair of that through your internal processes. So yes, again, generative AI covers a broad spectrum of answers to that. So it could be anything from internal representation of emails and updates to what's going on with a train or an engine or something that's going on at the moment. Matt, from your perspective, Gen AI and transport specific, and then we'll go on to
I'd say two things quickly. One is the example I just mentioned, where we're taking OEM information from OEM vendors and collating that and summarizing it for engineers to be able to do the job of work they need to do. And I think the second one, which is actually a personal example, I was due to fly somewhere the week before last, and my flight was cancelled. And the airline sent me a text message with a link which took me through to an AI chatbot that allowed me to rebook on another flight. So it was a really quick way of me being able to kind of sort that problem out. Jocasta, how about you? Have you seen any that's worth talking about?
Yeah, certainly. So I mean, currently it's a slightly tenuous link to transport, but it's got wheels, so I'm going with it. So the Formula E team, so Google working with Formula E, and the ability to kind of take data at high speed off of the cars, do the analytics on that, and then provide that information back to the drivers is absolutely critical to that. And I think that's, you know, a very easy use case to translate into the public sector transport space. But also, you know, we've kind of spoken about the kind of glitzy side of kind of AI, but actually, you know, there is a lot of uses, you know, that are kind of back office, and, you know, everybody kind of forgets all of that. But that ability to do that reporting that I was talking about, or to go through contracts and things, as Matt said earlier, it's the mundane stuff, and the ability to remove what we call toil from people's everyday, so that they can actually focus better on what their jobs actually are than the administration of it.
Perfect. Thank you, everyone. So the next question is kind of around skills. What expertise do I need in my team to make the most out of Gen AI?
I'm gonna jump in before Matt. And it depends. What you want to get out of it is the obvious answer. Again, Gen AI is not a off-the-shelf product you buy, and that's positive in a way that you take different aspects of different technology to what you want to do. But Matt, from a skill set perspective, it depends what you want to do, I guess.
Yeah, it does, and you're right. You know, it is the engineer's answer. You know, the answer is it depends on what you're trying to achieve. But I think what I would say is that two things. One is, as I said earlier, you don't have to be a technical expert to work with this technology. And in fact, the best deployments of this technology and applications of it that I've seen involve what we call cross-functional teams, where you have people with the kind of domain knowledge, as we call it, or the business expertise, or the sector expertise involved, and then you have some technical people as well. In terms of kind of the technical skills that you need, the second thing I'd say is that it's not the case that anymore that you need to be, you know, a very accomplished data scientist to take advantage of these technologies. You can now, with products, so Google, I mentioned, have Vertex AI, and there is a range of capabilities in there. So if you're a very experienced data scientist and you have a need to train your own machine learning models to accuracy and deploy those through into production environments, you can do that in Vertex AI. But you can also take advantage of Google's pre-trained foundation models, as they're known. And to do that, you don't have to be a data scientist. There are some very nice, almost low-code experiences there that allow you to take advantage of those models. So it's not the case that it's no longer the case that you need to be a very kind of niche set of skills to take advantage of these technologies. They're available to kind of every level of ability, I'd say.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with that, Matt. As you say, there are various tools for various jobs, and you pick the right tool for the right job, and you pick the tool that you're most comfortable using. So that's why we have a range of tools available in the Google Cloud Platform to allow that to happen. So even as an example, within the Google Cloud Console, using what used to be Duet AI, now Gemini, you have the ability to turn that on in your console so that you can see, and you could summarize alerts, and you can get all of that kind of information at your fingertips. You don't actually have to then go in and kind of code all of that, because it's just there and it's built for you as an agent to assist you in your day-to-day job. The same with our contact center AI capability and the agent assist that's in there, and it will sort through all of that information and pull up the information that you've asked it, so that you can as an agent carry on your conversation and actually deliver real impact to the people that are calling you.
Thank you. So I think we've got time for one last question. So what do you think is the biggest misconception around Gen AI, and can you set the record straight?
Chakasta will be a good one from a Google perspective. For me, it's I'll say the horrible P word, procurement, and how you procure Gen AI. It's a problem-solving set of technologies. I think we can all work together to help on that. But yeah, I'll defer to Jocasta and then Matt on that.
I think for me, it's not necessarily about misconception. I think there's been so much press about it. I think people understand mostly at a high level what generative AI is. I think we've already spoken about, I guess, one misconception, which is it can solve everything, which clearly it can't. I think, to pick up on Sean's point about procurement, AI in general is a movable feast. And I think coming from an era where everybody was buying bits of software, and software did exactly what it said on the tin, and I bought this because it's going to do this, and therefore I know what the outcome is going to be. And I think the ability and the onus is on us as vendors and our partners as well, to educate the world that actually things are changing, and that AI, when you buy an AI model and you're training it, it's not going to stay the same, and it's not always going to give you the same answer.
They're building blocks. They're building blocks.
They are building blocks, but it's that movability, that flexibility. Models will change over time, and I think actually it's a really interesting question for government and procurement teams to try and get their heads around. Is how do you regulate that when you're buying something, but it's unless you maintain it, it's going to move over time. So that's a really challenge. Yeah, it's a real challenge that the government are having to deal with right now. And that procurement side of things is, well, okay, but you said it was going to do this. And well, yes, but your data has led it to give this answer. So how do you mirror that ambiguity in procurement processes? I don't think anybody's got the answer to that yet, but it's something that as an industry we have to voice, and we have to make sure that people are aware of that, and we have to help form the answers. We don't have the answer, but we need to draw attention to it and make sure that we are having and involved in the conversations.
I think acknowledging that by the very nature of a learning model is iterative. I think the opportunities that we work with and the deployments we work with are iterative in nature. We work to provide a quick to market, minimum viable product service in those areas, but the models and the products and services are iterative in nature, and this is the business problem we're trying to solve. Here's version 1.0. 3.0 actually may only take 3 weeks. We're not talking about months and years here. It's learning very, very quickly. So it's a fast moving problem.
Yeah, and I'd give three. I think that there is no one biggest misconception, but there's three I can think of sort of off the top of my head. One is we've already talked about, which is people see it as a silver bullet. It's potentially the panacea that's going to solve all their problems. And whenever I've seen people think about technology being that ultimate problem solver, I always find that they're starting in the wrong place, because they need to first understand exactly what problems they need to solve, and then we can talk about technology. We've already talked about that though. The second one that comes to mind is that people often are very aware of the public cases where services that use AI have experienced what's known as hallucinations. And what that means is basically these models will generate often text, and that text will not be correct or accurate. It'll be wrong, and there's been very public examples where that's been the case. You can use a number of different techniques to mitigate that risk. So we've talked about prompts, so the inputs that you put into these models to get the outputs. You can do a thing called prompt engineering to basically make sure that these models don't give people the wrong information. You can do a thing called grounding, where you make sure they have access to very specific information or cohorts of data that they can respond from. And you can also, in some cases, fine tune them as well to tweak those responses. So I think that's a misconception that I come across a lot, which is that these models are prone to error. Well, actually, that's inherent in how they're designed, and it's the onus is on us as the users and consumers of those models to make sure that they don't error, and there's ways that we can do that. And the last misconception that I'll say for now is I think often I talk to people and they think, oh, I can't use AI in my organization because. And the response to that, I think, is linked into the procurement point, Chikasta and Sean, that you were talking about. I think part of this is a procurement problem, and part of it is an enablement problem in the organisations people I talk to work in. So I think that is a misconception, though. And once we navigate that procurement problem, we're often able to show people they can take advantage of this technology well.
Yeah. No, I think in closing, I think we need to look at the procurement of these kind of services and ongoing call-off consultancy-based discussion, whereby you have a business problem and we look to try and help you solve that from our perspective using best-in-class Google solutions. But no. From my perspective, we've got a lot of very interesting conversations going on. Some early days, some in production, some now referenceable case studies. But I think from generative AI hitting the mainstream in November, December, really last year, I think we pivoted pretty quickly with the help of Chikasta and other people at Google to really help answer some pretty big business questions. So from my perspective, really interesting. Happy to take any questions after this. But yeah, thank you very much for everyone's time here today.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you, Sean. As Sean mentioned, if you have any questions, I've just included our contact information on the screen, and that's for any of the speakers that are on today's call. So yeah, thank you very much for everyone's time today, and I'll say goodbye.
Cheers, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.